Hello, grade 2 teachers. Let's have a look at some ways that you can connect computer science into your energy unit. So you already know that the grade 2 computer science curriculum is full of a whole lot of knowledge, and you do have quite a number of skills and procedures in there too that are expected to be covered regarding computer science. The lovely thing about all of the skills and procedures and knowledge is that they largely revolve around following instructions. So if we just look at the learning outcome that says students follow instructions and relate them to outcomes, we can see that all of the extra stuff that's in the cusps in the curriculum is really just specific ways of working with instructions. And we have lots of opportunities throughout our days, classroom routines, other lessons that you're doing to work with instructions and also then cover some of these computer science skills and procedures in other areas. We do see in grade 2 the notion of debugging, which was on just the past slide. And then also, although it's not specifically stated here, we also see the concept of looping coming in. So those are two specific computer science coding concepts that come in through all of these skills and procedures that you're seeing. Those are the two that really are explicitly coding. Everything else is talking about following instructions, interpreting instructions, finding mistakes in instructions, looking for two different sets of instructions to get to the same place, and those kinds of things. So the computer science curriculum, all the way from kindergarten through grade 6, talks about three big overarching ideas. One being computational thinking, next being design thinking process, and finally creativity. Creativity in science means finding new solutions to old problems or finding a new path to the same place. And we ask students to do that a lot during science investigations and experiments. And creativity comes up explicitly in the grade 2 skills and procedures as well. So you're going to be wanting to use the word creativity and talk to your students about creative thinking, finding a new way as much as you can. So the first big idea in your energy unit is all around sound. Used to be grade 3, now it's moved down to grade 2. And you're going to be teaching your students all about vibration and sources of sound and characteristics of sound. When we're looking at characteristics, attributes, or properties, we have the opportunity to be working through the computational thinking. So as we talk about sounds, we can start to talk about characteristics of sounds, and we can start to think about making groupings of sounds. And as we're doing these things, we're decomposing the sounds down to their parts. Where are we looking at pitch? Or are we looking at some other attribute of sound? Are there things that are the same between sounds? How are musical instruments all the same, and how do they differ? And are there some musical instruments that you could group up together based on certain attributes? Can we find some patterns in these sounds? And can we simplify? Can we put everything into something that just says low sounds or just high sounds? Can we just simplify and abstract that down to its most basic form so that we're only just looking at this one single attribute? If I've been asked to sort sounds out like this into high and low, I'm only considered with the pitch of these sounds. And it doesn't matter if it comes from a living or a non-living thing. I'm only concerned about the pitch. That is the very simplest form of computational thinking. Just by asking students to focus on characteristics, to talk about characteristics, to look for patterns, you're going to be building those computational thinking skills while you're also covering these other science topics. When we move into asking students to create some type of a project, In grade 4, the term artifact comes up in their computer science, and artifact just refers to something that the students are making. So we don't see the term artifact here in the grade 2 curriculum, though they are being asked to build a device to change the behavior of sound. So that device would be an artifact. And in creation of an artifact in grade 4, we're looking at using the design process to create those artifacts. So again, in grade 2, you're not explicitly teaching the design thinking process, but you are going to ask students to move through at least some of the stages of the design thinking process as they're creating this project. And we can also ask students to do some computational thinking in thinking about what their design is, breaking their design down into its various parts. What are all of the materials you're going to need to build the thing that you want to build? And now I've decomposed that. And are all of these materials readily available? Can you find some things that are the same or different between them, so that if you can't find a particular material, is there something else that could replace it? So we could look for some pattern recognition there. And if you're coming up with a plan for your project, we only have so much time and we only have so many materials. So we need to make your device as simple as possible. What is extra in this design and can be removed and isn't needed, so that we just meet our outcome. Our objective is to change the behavior of sound. We want to make a sound change somehow with what we've built. Everything else doesn't matter. So that's how we can loosely bring in computational thinking, just by having conversations with the students. Wording things in a particular way is having them work on computational thinking and design thinking without necessarily explicitly teaching that to them. Having them build their sound device and then testing it out and then going back to make changes, working through that design process. We can do a class brainstorm before the project starts to generate ideas. That's going to help students who need a little bit of scaffolding when it comes to the energy concept and how they can build this device that's going to change sound. That brainstorming class discussion at the beginning, as I say, scaffold for those kids, give everybody lots of ideas, a great place to start from. We're covering that design process. Use the term brainstorming later when they're learning about design process and the teacher says brainstorming is a part of the design process. They immediately have connections to things that they have done in the past. With building a device to change the behavior of sound, we have also some opportunities to bring in some of the computer science skills and procedures a little bit more explicitly. So we have a lot of skills and procedures here around instructions, 3 to 4 step instructions, creating them, finding errors in them, testing them, refining them, working collaboratively with other people. So, exchanging ideas or working in groups. So I've got them all here. You're probably not going to be explicitly covering all of these at one time in an energy lesson, although you could be. But there's just those opportunities to informally draw it in. So can you write in a set of instructions and leave it by your instrument or your device, because we're going to do a science fair share and we're all going to move around and your classmates are going to have to figure out how to use your device based on the instructions that you leave behind. So make sure you write a really good set of instructions. And so just in asking students to do that as sort of a culmination to this device building project, I'm going to be also able to tick off some of these computer science skills and procedures, whether I'm explicitly assessing them right now or I'm just having students practice these skills for assessment later on. It's a great opportunity to draw them into this energy concept and practice with these instructions and building algorithms. You can use the term algorithm. It's not a part of the science curriculum for grade 2, but it never hurts to introduce that language early on. Talk about building algorithms. We could talk about doing these instructions for a machine and make that extra connection to the computational thinking as it relates to coding specifically. When we ask students to do sorts, so whether we're talking about sources of light, we might be grouping them by natural and man-made. We might be looking at bright or dim. We might be looking at electrical or otherwise. Anytime we're doing sorts, we're working through computational thinking. So depending on what our end goal is, if we want to determine whether it's natural or man-made, there are specific attributes about those sources of light that we're going to look at. And then there are other attributes that we're just going to ignore because only certain attributes actually help me to determine if something is natural or man-made. So there is that computational thinking process without drawing it out specifically or explicitly for your students, but we're working through it. We're talking about attributes. We're looking specifically at different parts of these sources of light so that we can do these sorts. And then again, we always have that opportunity to extend to the algorithm design. Can you write a rule for what makes something a source of light? Could you write a set of instructions to tell a machine how to tell if something is bright or dim? And those formal or informal opportunities to do some algorithm design is going to hit some computer science outcomes and also help your students develop some really great critical thinking and problem solving skills too. Conducting an investigation, again, we can write algorithms for paths of light. We can do some if-then statements. We can call them that or not. We can just call them rules. Can we write some rules or algorithms for how light travels? Brainstorm together as a class. When light starts, it moves forward forever. If light hits a mirror, then it refracts. We're actually creating conditional statements here. The students, then when they have to know what a conditional statement is in grade 6, they're going to make this connection. Oh, we've been doing these if-then statements to write science rules all the way along, or to write our classroom procedure rules like if the fire bell goes, then I complete these steps. So just natural ways to connect that language into what you're doing in your science classes or your other classes, asking students to just state out those instructions, write a rule, write something a machine could follow. We're working with computer science skills and procedures. In the computer science for grade 2, students are asked to identify ways creativity is used to design instructions. I am using a little bit of creative license here and just talking about creativity in design as opposed to design and instructions specifically. I think this is just a good way that we can have students look at how natural objects, affect the path of sun. That's a fairly simple, we're talking about shadows, we're talking about reflection, but then we can go a little bit deeper and talk about, hey, how do you think once upon a time someone looked at a tree and thought we need to figure out a way to make trees where we want them quickly so we can shade from the sun, and someone invented shelter, and that eventually evolved into full-blown houses and what we live in today. Same as in somebody saw some light reflect off some water, and eventually that led to how do we make mirrors, and mirrors are used in really complex things like fancy telescopes. So just sort of looking at how nature has inspired design is a way to get your students thinking about creativity as it relates to design and science, and eventually coding and computational thinking. So those are some ways you can connect computer science into your energy unit. I hope you enjoyed.